Oh, yeah.
Hereby call to order the GPC meeting for Monday, August 10th, 2020. And at this time, we will take a silent moment of personal reflection. As a reminder, all members of council are obligated to declare a conflict of interest or a pecuniary interest as per section 133 of the Lloydminster Charter regarding any item on this agenda. I'll remind everyone this meeting is for discussion and information gathering only. All decisions will occur during regular council meetings. We would like to thank all our presenters at this time for their time. Moving on to number 2 on the agenda, the approval of the agenda. I'll look for direction from council. Councillor Buckingham.
Move the agenda dated August 10th, 2020 be approved.
Seconder. Councillor Fagnan. Any further discussion? I'll call for all in favor. Councillor Baker, how do you vote?
In favor, Your Worship.
Thank you. Opposed? Carried. Moving on to agenda item number 3, the approval of the previous meeting minutes. I'll look for direction from council. Councillor Buckingham.
Move the Governance and Priorities Committee minutes dated July 13th, 2020 be approved.
Thank you. Looking for a seconder. Councillor Torgerson. Thank you. Any further discussion? Not noting any, I'll call for the question. All in favor? And how do you vote, Councillor Baker? Councillor Baker.
Pardon me, Your Worship.
How do you vote?
In favor.
Thank you. Opposed? Carried. All right. Before moving on to administration reports, I have a unique and an opportunity I wanted to share with council and the administration. I received a letter from the CAMA, the Association, the Canadian Association of Municipal Administrators, for long service recognition. This award is presented to individuals who have, based on their number of years of service of full-time paid employment in the municipal government in a management capacity as the Chief Administrative Officer or reporting directly to a Chief Administrative Officer. They are granted at 10 years and given every 5 years, increments after that. This year, it's an honor for our municipality to acknowledge the commitment of our Chief Financial Officer, Ms. Denise McDonald, for her 25 years to municipal service in a management capacity. I have the honor to present Denise with her pin today. Moving on to agenda item number 4.1. I'll look to the city manager.
Good afternoon, Your Worship and Council. To present 4.1 2020 quarter 2 procurement activity, I'll ask Miko Wengler to come forward to present.
Good afternoon, Your Worship and Council. I am here to present the quarter 2 procurement activity report. Section 8.2 of the Procurement and Purchasing Policy requires that this activity be presented to the Council on a quarterly basis. The options are that the committee accept this report as information, or that the committee request more information and it can be brought forward to a future Governance and Priorities Committee meeting. I am not going to run over the whole report, however, I do want to bring your attention to a couple items. As you notice that the contingencies are typically listed under the awarded amount, and the first street improvement program has a contingency of 10%, as well the very last item, the data center refresh, has a contingency of 15%, which is not listed on this report, but my apologies for missing that, but I will get it on the final agenda. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Mika. Questions of Mika? Councilor Torres?
Thank you, Your Worship. Am I on here? Hello? Hello?
Nope, you're not on.
Hello?
There you are.
There we go. Must have been all already. No, just a general comment. When we look at the dates that this would cover, quarter two being the months of April, May, June, I just want to say, generally speaking, considering the circumstances that we were under through that part of the COVID period, we still did I would say, a fantastic job of tendering things out, using a fair process, and allowing for, tenders to go out and for the proper scoring and everything. And I just think, all things considered, and especially the number of ones that have council approval as well and made their way to council, I think it's fairly impressive, all things considered. So that's all I really have to say for the group of administration in general, is actually kind of following a fair process and not going through the emergency kind of clauses that exist within our purchasing program as much as possible. So, thank you.
Any other, Councilor Dychak?
Thanks, Your Worship. Thanks, Mika. The other thing for me as well is that seeing each of these projects sort of in context with the other really gives one the real sense of actually the amount of work that's being done in the city, the different areas as well, and the amount of money we're spending. And I think, it's always important to keep in mind that we do have a lot of capital projects, we have a lot of needs as well. And as we look at this, it really gives us some perspective around our spending. So I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Councilor Baker, do you have any questions or comments?
No, Your Worship, it looks pretty good to me based on the last one. All of it through, it looks good, and I think Jonathan hit the nail on the head.
Thank you. I'll ask one more time around the table if there's any other questions for Mika. Thank you, Mika. I think it's very much appreciated looking at this in a quarterly, as it's been discussed, quarterly snapshot to see that the activity is moving forward. And thank you very much for that report.
Thank you.
Moving on to agenda item 4.2, I'll look to the city manager.
Thank you, Your Worship. For 4.2, dangerous goods route and truck route establishment, I'll ask James Rogers to come forward.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council.
Good afternoon, James. Welcome.
There we go. Can you hear me better?
We got you.
Okay, before you is the dangerous goods route and truck route establishment information report. So the topic today is to provide the committee with information pertaining to the City of Woodminster's truck routes and dangerous goods route establishment project. The 2015 Transportation Master Plan identified a need to create and adopt new dangerous goods routes and update truck routes within the City of Woodminster. During the June 19, 2017 Governance and Priorities Committee meeting, administration presented information regarding current truck route and dangerous goods routes, as well as recommendations associated with adjusting these routes. The City of Woodminster's current traffic bylaw has both truck routes and dangerous goods routes. However, the dangerous goods routes only consist of 44th Street and 50th Avenue, or Highway 16 and Highway 17, and is requiring updating. Administration initiated a request for proposal on May 7, 2019 to secure the services of an engineering consultant to complete a study to update and develop the truck routes and dangerous goods routes within municipal boundaries. An engineering consultant was selected on June 21st, 2019. Throughout the project, both stakeholder and public engagement opportunities were held as follows, and we will touch base on these within the presentation in more detail. October 17th, 2019, we held an open house and a stakeholder engagement. October 10th to the 22nd, 2019, we held an online engagement. And December 3rd, 2019, we held an open house and stakeholder engagement again with draft concepts presented. The next steps include administration to prepare text amendments to the City of Woodminster's traffic bylaw for council consideration and endorsement of new truck routes and dangerous goods routes. And secondly, administration to include the truck route and dangerous goods route signage procurement and implementation project in the 2021 capital budget request for council consideration. Before we get into the presentation, I would just like to remind everybody that truck routes are different from dangerous goods routes. They are separate roads. You have to have a truck route for a dangerous goods route, but you do not have They need to have a truck route for a dangerous goods route, but you cannot have a dangerous goods route without a truck route, if that makes sense. They are two separate roads. With that, I'll turn it over to Cameron Motley of ISL Engineering and Land Services, who was the successful consultant on our project. So I'll turn it over to Cameron.
Thank you, James. Good afternoon, Your Worship, members of the committee. James said, my name is Cameron Motley. I am the Transportation Planning Manager at ISL Engineering, and I was the project manager for the truck route and dangerous goods route establishment study. James has asked me to join him today to provide you with an overview of our project and the recommendations that came from the study. I'm going to be providing some news to the people in the room to advance the slides. I do know a copy of the presentation was previously provided and is included with the agenda. Hopefully everyone is looking at slide 1 right now. And with that, we'll ask if we can move to slide 2. Before my presentation today, I'll provide a brief background on the project, an outline of the project purpose, an overview of the study methodology, and an overview of the recommendations that were provided for truck routes, dangerous goods routes, signage, as well as bylaw amendments. Next slide, please. As James mentioned, the city's 2015 Transportation Master Plan identified the need to create and establish formal dangerous goods routes, and both 44th Street and 50th Avenue were initially adopted as the sole dangerous goods routes within the city. It was also recognized that these routes did not fully serve the needs of the community. In addition, it was recognized that the existing truck route required review and validation. Currently, route contradictions exist between the traffic bylaw and the transportation systems bylaws, as well as between the identified truck routes and dangerous goods routes. In addition, as James noted, following the 2017 Governance Priorities Committee on June 19th, City Administration initiated the process to begin a more in-depth study on truck routes and dangerous goods routes that involve public participation. Next slide, please. This study was completed with a 6-step process to review and refine options for alternate truck routes and dangerous goods routes. To do this, the project team reviewed background conditions, created an evaluation framework, developed route options, consulted with industry and the public, analyzed route options, and selected recommended routes. This process allowed the project team to continually gather more information and to provide the City of Lloydminster with recommendations that best suited the city. Next slide, please. At step 1, the background conditions review was completed in 4 parts. A legislation and data review looked at provincial acts and regulations, city bylaws, policies, and procedures, as well as the available city data. The jurisdiction review was completed in 8 comparable jurisdictions that were selected based on city size and highway locations to understand their route location and route selection procedures, as well as to review their bylaws and master plans. A current conditions review was completed that looked at the trucking patterns both in and through the city, which showed both increases in both volumes and truck percentages. Finally, a network review was completed to better understand the issues, challenges, constraints, and opportunities for truck routes and dangerous goods routes within Lloydminster. Next slide, please. The truck route and dangerous goods routes evaluation frameworks were proposed to address the most common stakeholder questions associated with route identification and selection. These questions are typically, why is a route here? why is the route not there? And why can't trucks simply just go around the city? To develop the route evaluation framework, the project completed a best practice review, identified potential evaluation criteria, highlighted criteria most often used by other comparable jurisdictions, assessed the criteria applicability for Westminster, proposed draft criteria for route assessment, and requested stakeholder and public feedback on the criteria. Finding recommended frameworks that could consistently be applied were proposed. These frameworks fundamentally need to fit your city and your context. In consideration, the possible criteria, the team looked at available data, ease and cost of data collection, ease of framework use, understanding and interpretation, as well as its repeatability, reliability, and dependability. Next slide, please. With respect to truck rates, the evaluation framework was developed as a two-step process with a route functionality assessment and a route performance assessment. In the route functionality assessment, the 4 criteria were assessed as yes/no questions, whereby a potential route must serve the destination and must connect to another part of your truck network. While the route is not required to reduce trips or the number of off-route trips, these criteria were noted as desirable and as indicators of route functionality. With the route performance assessment, the 6 criteria considered roadway classification, existing geometric, surface conditions, railroad crossing, land use compatibility, and how the route may support future development. These criteria were assessed as either very good, fair, or poor to provide guidance on route selection. Next slide, please. With respect to dangerous goods routes, the evaluation framework was developed as a 3-step process with a route functionality assessment and a 2-part safety assessment. The route functionality assessment was similar to truck routes with the addition of a route compatibility criteria where, as names noted, potential dangerous goods routes must be located on an established truck route. Similar to truck routes, this criteria were assessed as yes/no, where a potential route must answer yes to the first 3 questions. The safety assessment considered 9 criteria in 2 parts that assess the probability and significance or risk of a dangerous goods incident along a potential route. In addition to roadway geometrics and rail crossings, the probability assessment considered access, traffic efficiency, and collision. The significance of assessment considered environmental impact, population exposure and land use, population responsiveness and evacuation potential, as well as the level of emergency response. Next slide, please. The first phase of engagement for this project was completed throughout October 2019. During phase 1 engagement, the team met with stakeholders during a series of small group meetings, as well as online and through a public Your Voice event. Phase 1 engagement helped the team understand stakeholder and public concerns with the existing truck routes and dangerous goods routes, as well as allowed us to gather feedback on where alternate routes could be located and how these routes should be evaluated. During phase 1, we heard that public safety and minimizing risk were important factors to consider, and that many participants wanted to see a bypass for trucks around the city. Next slide, please. Following phase 1 engagement, several route options were developed for consideration. Truck route options were developed for the north, southeast, and southwest sections of the city, where the dangerous goods route options were developed on a citywide basis. Options considered provided more, fewer, or an equal number of routes than exist today, as well as assessed the do-nothing options. These options provided opportunities for feedback from engagement and then allow the team to assess the level of route functionality, truck and dangerous goods route destinations, truck route areas, as well as the potential for restricted truck routes. Next slide, please. The truck and dangerous goods route options were shared with stakeholders and the public during the second phase of engagement during December of last year. During phase 2 engagement, the team again met with stakeholders during a series of small group meetings, as well as with the public through your voice event. Phase 2 engagement allowed the team to share each option for truck routes and dangerous goods routes with stakeholders and the public, and allowed them to express concerns with and provide feedback on the proposed options. This was done to ensure that the selected options were balanced and both useful for stakeholders while acceptable for citizens. During phase 2, we heard that creating truck route areas would be beneficial for all options, as well as providing targeted network improvements, such as turn lanes at 75th Avenue and 12th Street to better facilitate truck movement. Next slide, please. The technical assessment for truck routes considered and evaluated 58 roadway segments along highways, arterial roads, collector roads, and even some local roads, whereas the dangerous goods route assessment only considered and evaluated 27 segments along roadways identified as highways and arterial roads. As the project took a clean slate approach and evaluated the entire network on a citywide basis, all of the identified and evaluated roadway segments were initially considered as potential candidates for being recommended as a dangerous goods route and/or truck route. Using the evaluation framework and the assessment against the criteria, routes were rated as either strong candidates, good candidates, or poor candidates for inclusion in the dangerous goods route and truck route network. Next slide. With respect to the truck route, the map as shown outlines the recommendations that preceded phase 2 engagement and the technical evaluation. With the recommendations, the following 6 key features are noted, as the truck route network provides more routes than the existing network, removes 50th Avenue in the downtown from the network, removes 50th Avenue and replaces it with 51st Street in the residential area, adds these truck route areas, as shown in purple, where all streets are truck routes. It identifies the future truck route extension on 52nd Street and designates 3 times a day restricted truck routes adjacent to residential areas. Along College Drive from 50th Avenue to 44th Street, 51st Street from 50th Avenue to 55th Avenue, and 50th Avenue from 51st Street to 62nd Street. Next slide, please. With respect to the dangerous goods route, the map as shown outlines the recommended routes that preceded phase 2 engagement and technical evaluation for dangerous goods routes. Within the recommendations, the following 5 key features are noted, as the proposed dangerous goods route network provides more routes than the existing network, but maintains the highest used route on 44th Street, provides 2 north-south routes on 40th Avenue and 75th Avenue, and avoids the commercial areas and downtown along 50th Avenue, while delivering all major industrial areas. Next slide, please. To support the implementation of these networks, a series of signage plan recommendations has been provided. The recommendations provide a visual representation of the regulatory and directional wayfinding signage that should be implemented utilizing a blend of permissive and prohibitive signage, directional arrows, and information tabs. A sample of the proposed signage has been included on this slide. In recognition of potential compliance and enforcement issues and concerns that may arise with the route changes, these recommendations are viewed as flexible as they can be amended and supplemented based on city needs. In addition to the regulatory signage, Optional dangerous goods route information signage has been identified for the major city entrances. Examples of similar signage from other jurisdictions are included on the slide. Next slide, please. As a final deliverable, the team completed a review of the city's traffic bylaw and transportation systems bylaw to determine what updates may be required to support the recommended route changes from this study. To support this task, the team reviewed the appropriate traffic, truck, and dangerous goods routes bylaws from 11 jurisdictions to identify bylaw best practices. In addition, the team discussed the practices for permitting the dangerous goods route with the fire chief or their designate from 5 comparable cities. Based on our review, the key proposed recommendations for the traffic bylaw include separating truck routes and dangerous goods routes from section 13 of the bylaw, adding maps of the recommended routes to schedules D and E, and listing all routes with a Term 2 description, and adding definitions of terms used within the recommendations in Schedule A. The proposed recommendations for the Transportation Systems Bylaw include amending and updating Schedule B with current route description. That concludes my presentation, Your Worship. I'm happy to answer any questions that may have arisen from the presentation or the report. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cameron. I will look around to council for members for questions and comments. So if you and James both stay with us, I'm sure we'll persevere. So we'll start with Councillor Fagan.
Yeah, I just wanted to more of a comment. This certainly was a deep dive into all these different aspects, and I know that certainly in the downtown area for the last 15 or 20 years, there's always been a concern as far as dangerous goods goes and truck traffic. So it's just great to see that that this has all been addressed. I think it's been well worth all the public as well as the stakeholders' input on this, and I think it's. I took a look at. I mean, it's done really well. I can't see any improvements that I would be able to make. So I commend you on the job well done.
Thank you.
Councillor Buckingham.
Thank you, Worship. More of a logistical question, I guess, or 2 logistical questions. With the proposed routes, are there any unidentified major roadway projects that are going to need to be done besides what we've identified at 12th and 75th, for example, that will have to be budgeted for, planned for, to actually accommodate this before pulling the trigger and getting a new bylaw in place on something like this?
I can take this one, Cameron. Thank you for your question, Councillor Buckingham. So right now we are able to implement the changes to the bylaw as well as implement the recommendations that we have within the presentation today. We will sign it appropriately. Now, as we add additional networks, including 52 Street between 67th Street and 75th Avenue, we will need to amend our truck routes and our dangerous goods routes. But as it sits today, we can implement this plan fully and have it running and operational.
My second question, if I may.
Sure.
The enforcement piece of this hasn't really been spoken to much in the presentation. Is there a dedicated enforcement once this is implemented? Is our bylaw teams and all of those involved in that? And what can we be expecting there if someone calls the city with a concern of something that's in the wrong place? Is our bylaw team been consulted and making a plan to actually enforce this once we go that way?
Once we get to enforcement, we have not initiated those discussions as of yet. We want to get a proper framework and our recommendations solidified before going forward. And then, of course, we need to amend the bylaw, have the signage, the appropriate signage in place to actually be able to enforce the truck routes and dangerous goods routes. And then we will be, in conjunction with that, working with public safety and bylaw to come up with how do we manage and maintain the traffic using this, as well as report concerns that people come in. So we are working on that as we proceed, but we haven't started that yet.
Yeah, the enforcement piece is interesting to me because you've got a really large swath of local companies that I think require a little bit of time to get used to the new rules, and you've got your general traffic going through on the major highways. So just wanted to bring that up, perhaps that when the enforcement piece came up, that they're might need to be some long-range planning done there to try and get this smoothly out and going, and get people used to it without, in my opinion, anyway, without necessarily bringing the hammer down on the first, month or two, whatever the case may be. But as long as the enforcement plan is in place to work with that, that's important to me anyways.
Absolutely. Just like any major changes like this, there's a fairly large education component, and getting back to our stakeholders that did have input on this, and a lot of them were local providers. So it will be educating them and then picking a date when this does become effective. But between now and then, bringing the education piece and just bringing everybody in the loop with respect to where and when this will become effective. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Dodger.
Thanks, Worship. Yeah, thank you, James, for the report, and Cameron. A couple things that just came to mind, and one is that even 75th Street, I think, again, is directed away from any residential areas. What I'm concerned about, I guess, the narrowness of the road and the narrowness of the shoulder on some of those roads, and what impact the heavy traffic will have on that part of the streets that we have. And I guess the second part is that when I look at the work that we've added to our plan with regards to even 62nd Street and 62nd Avenue and 44th, where the roads are getting hammered out, and we put that heavy-duty cement, will we be expected in the future to add that in other parts of the roads across, or where there's stoplights or stop areas?
Thank you for your questions, Councillor Datchuk. So the first question was 75th Avenue, 12th Street, 40th Avenue.
Yeah, all those narrow ones. Yeah.
They're all narrow, rural cross-section roads. Now that was taken into account with respect to the dangerous goods route. A lot of people would say, well, why is 44th Street still a dangerous goods road? The simple answer is our best road to handle that type of traffic. Correct, Cameron? So that's why we left 44th Street in there. Now we will monitor the truck traffic using those road cross sections, the reported concerns that come in, as well as any traffic accidents we do have. And if need be, we will start making those amendments. And then I've lost the second question again, sorry.
That paved or cement parts.
So the concrete at the intersections will act in the same way as geometry changes to 12th and 75th and 40th Avenue. As we see these intersections start to deteriorate because of the truck traffic, we will determine a need for a capital program to potentially increase the concrete blocks that we have, or rehab along 44th Street or any of the roads we do have. It should be noted that a lot of the routes that we do have are currently used as truck routes or dangerous goods roads. So we aren't forcing or driving a lot more traffic onto the roads that we're proposing. So it should stay fairly consistent.
Thank you.
Councillor Thorson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I believe I already answered this question, but just the area that we have listed as the truck route areas, are all those roads built to a standard to be able to take the heavy truck traffic? Assuming that, your collectors kind of thing, they will, and arterials, they are built to a higher standard to be able to take more weight more often. Then the question is the local traffic within those areas, are they built to a standard that should be able to take that same level of weight? Because there's quite a few in there that you can tell there's been some sagging in the road over time.
So thank you for your question. Yes, the areas denoted in purple with respect to the truck routes, those are predominantly or all located within industrial zones, where the asphalt design or the pavement design would have corresponded to that type of traffic. We have a different pavement structure compared to a residential to an industrial park, so it would have the thicker structure or the more robust pavement design. The sags in the road are contributed to another factor outside of pavement design and vehicle loading.
So, just to be clear, at the end of the day, they are built to that high standard that should be able to take it.
Correct.
Awesome. And then I had one other question, and it is about the dangerous goods route on 44th Street. I understand from a practical point of view, like, it's difficult with all the services that are there for the truck traffic, how you would ever get away from having it on there. But looking at some of the things that we're looking at from a perspective of safety and probability and everything else, I'd imagine that those would have scored fairly poorly just from the number of collisions that happen within the city that are going to end up being dragged would be likely the most common. It also has, emergency response and things like that. Well, you actually potentially have some kind of risk as you're going past the RCMP building, or you have some kind of risk as you're going past an elementary school or a mall that has a lot of people in it. So I'm just curious, at the end of the day, is it more so from the practicality and the standard to which that road is built that kind of caused it to still be near the top of the list?
Cameron, can I defer that question to you? Are you still there?
I am. Thank you, James, and through the chair, in consideration of 44th Street, I'm just reviewing the risk assessment, and as I believe it was Councillor Torrance noted, that roadway did receive a rating of fair for both traffic efficiency and collision, but it was scored as either good or very good on the other criteria, and did receive a rating of strong in terms of recommendation. On the functionality assessment, it did provide consistency with the truck route network and what needs to be the most efficient and most direct route for traffic that was destined east-west through the city. The bypass route added considerable length for dangerous goods and introduced rail crossings that aren't in place on 44th Street.
All right, yeah, thank you. I thought it was important to at least bring up some of those other points that I thought may have been relevant, but at the end of the day, I trust that you guys are able to complete this and did a good job on it and everything. I think that hearing that those ones were graded as good and fair on those items, some of which are somewhat surprising as far as things like collisions, but at the end of the day, I do agree that likely it's the quickest way through town and gets dangerous goods in and out of your community as quick as possible as well. So that's another thing that I think about. So thank you.
Councillor Buckingham.
Thank you, Worship. I think I'll just speak to this from a emergency response perspective, from my experience with that, and I think it goes along with what our presenter was talking about. Decreasing the chance of crossings at railway tracks is a good thing. Going around and making those turns increases your opportunity for intersection collision. So I think that the reason that in their consultation with fire chiefs and people like that, I would assume that the quickest point between two places is a straight line. And it takes away a lot of turning along the railroad track. And although in some cases it's not ideal to have some of the dangerous goods going right through there, it is, by all accounts, in our situation, I think, the safest possible way to do that when mitigating all those turns and tracks and potential crossings. So I think from an emergency response perspective, it also adds that our crews can get there and mitigate those situations as quickly as possible. But it probably makes sense that they've got it that way for those reasons.
Councillor Dutchuk.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. I think the other question I had is that, seeing the trucks go down Highway 16, and we have one truck stop area by the Esso right there, and it's the main one. I was talking to a trucker about a week and a half ago, and complaining about how there was a lack of areas where people could spend the night with the trucks and park, because they have to spend, a certain number of hours not driving and resting and so on and so forth, and identified that as a shortage. And I guess in part, right now, that's our primary truck stop, is the only truck stop, in my understanding, within our community. And so if we're going to move outside of that space, if you like, of using Highway 16 as a route, then we also need to have some consideration relative to where these truckers are going to park. And I realize that's a private business, but by the same token, it's a service that we otherwise don't have at this point outside of the city.
Very well taken, and I think that during certain times of the year, more in the winter, I've noticed we can line 16 highway from the west side of the city right through to the east side. Railroad trucks have been able to park, along 16 on the service roads adjacent to it, and I think that indicates how important 16 highway plays to our city, and from that perspective, that's supported by this truck report. I've got a couple questions, and I'll defer to Councillor Baker, but James, this has been a discussion point. I've heard a lot from people over the last 4 years. So I appreciate this coming forward, the work that's been done by yourself, Cameron at ISL, and the entire team. Just a couple simple questions to help reinforce this for maybe the entire community. When we talk about a truck route, what trucks are we governing on those truck routes? Because we see pickup trucks, we see one-ton trucks in our city, we see semi-trailers, we see what they refer to as body jobs. So can you provide a little insight as to when we talk about the truck route and truck size, what are we referring to there?
Cameron, can you answer that from a very technical point?
Yes, thank you. Just reviewing the traffic bylaw now, the definition is really size and length dependent. I can't remember how many tons we are looking at, but it's intended to be larger, heavy trucks, typically semis or tractor trailers.
Right.
Not single body trucks.
Okay, so
Not personal vehicles, 1 ton. Those would not fall under the definition of truck.
unless they were hauling a dangerous good, and that moves them to a different category, I imagine.
Your worship, if I may.
If you can bear with me just another moment or two yet, Councillor Baker, I just wanted to get through a couple more here if I can. So Cameron, in that discussion, your basic moving truck on the small version and even on the big version, based on the weight capacity, people wouldn't, we'd still allow moving trucks into our neighborhoods, correct?
That is my understanding, yeah.
Okay. Now this is where I'm going to go in a little grayer area. So a homeowner is a owner-operator and decides to bring his semi home for the night. Can he do that with what you're proposing? To park on the street, simply to be able to get up in the morning and go to take his truck to work? I see that. I'm not sure who to point that to, so I'll leave it open.
Under our current under our current traffic bylaw, a larger vehicle of that nature would not be allowed into a residential area other than to make deliveries if such delivery was necessary. It would be allowed for overnight parking. Same as dangerous goods would not be allowed into a residential area.
Okay, thank you. That's
They've been using school parking lots in the past.
They have been using neighborhood side streets as well, so just a good thing to know. I guess the last...
If I might just add to that question. So that is not at all. So the question I'm asking is if it's a 53-foot semi-trailer versus a truck that's bobtailing to come home from a gentleman that doesn't have a load hooked onto that, is there a difference there between the actual truck and having a whole trailer hooked up, or it's just not allowed?
It's just not allowed. The roads in the residential area are not designed for those type of rates.
Okay. Last one, and then I'll, Councillor Baker, one more, and I'll have you up, if you bear with me. I just wanted to note College Drive. I appreciate the time that they're being proposed, the 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. The only reservation I have is when the oil and gas industry comes back, we may need to revisit, the council of the day at that time may need to revisit that bylaw, because there are a lot of industrial and oil field service companies located in our industrial area that pay taxes, and if they can't... Hello, Councillor. Yeah, just one...
Can you hear me? I'm sorry. You can't see my hand, right?
No, I can't, but I've got you on the list here. You
My
bet.
apologies for not being here every day.
No, it's all good.
I'll be back.
Okay.
I have a question, and it's I've watched it for years, but the other day, we stopped and I had a hamburger, my wife and I, at one of the restaurants at one of the main intersections, Highway 44, Highway 716, 44th Street. And you know, you get these big B trains and they're going 60 kilometers, and they slow to 50 out somewhere on the west end and east end. These pre-warning lights, the lights are going to change to amber. And I watched probably for about 15 minutes. And half a dozen trucks maybe went through. And they're going 50 kilometers an hour. And all of a sudden the amber hits. And they can't get stopped. And there's a car in front of them going about 42 kilometers an hour. And so consequently, they end up running partially through a red light. That's what it looked to me. I'm not a traffic policeman, so I don't know, but down the road, is there some consideration when you do a truck route that's a straight line with the 60-50 zone built into it, rather than a straight 50 zone? If you could consider a pre-warning light that the lights were going to change, because I witnessed that a couple of times, just in that 10 or 15 minutes. And I hope you understand what I mean here. But, you know, you're going when the light starts flashing amber, it lets you know there's going to be a light change coming up. And on some of the longer spans, that might be worth considering. And if you don't understand me today, I hope to be there next week and show you.
I do, Councillor. Thank you for the question. I'll look to James or to Cameron. Is that something to consider?
Thank you for your question, Councilor Baker. So that is something that we do consider when we are implementing traffic signals. And that would be the speed on the approach to that intersection, the geometry of that approach. Is it on a corner? Is it a blind corner? Can you see the intersection? But we would put that to, I guess, the driver adhering to the safe and effective rules of the road. You do know that you are in an urban environment where the traffic signals are going to change. We have implemented a program, the Centrax program, where we are trying to increase that green band so we have those larger trucks that can continue through the city without that stop and go and the need to, or the perceived need to run the red lights. So that is something that we think about when designing new lights, but it did not have an impact or come into effect through this program.
Great question, Councillor Baker, because I'd like to add to that.
I don't totally understand the new system. Maybe some of that's built into it. The detail that's built into it, but I just an observation I made there.
Nope.
And I thought, those big trucks do 5 seconds or 10 seconds sooner. They probably could have stopped. But a couple of them where I know they were right on the edge, and the tractor was, when it flipped the red, the nose was already in the intersection. So, whether you blame the trucker, or you blame the light, or you blame nobody, I don't know, but I wasn't blaming anybody, I was just making an observation, wondering about that.
Very good observation, Councillor Baker, because I heard from an individual, as James relayed to, blind spots. The only one I've heard about, and this gentleman hauls to the ADM crushing facility from the south of town, was the lights now on College Drive in 59th coming, because he says when you're rolling through with about 140,000 pounds of truck and canola and trailer, it's a little difficult to stop. He says going home empty, I'm okay. But thank you, Councillor. That would be one area that would be worth considering potentially for that. And who knows with technology today? I hope we could do it with Bluetooth and not have to have cable in the ground. But just one thought further to Councillor Baker's. Going back to the College Drive, that'd be my only reservation is that 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. may need to, if the industry comes back, when it comes back, not if, when, that we make that allowance that Council of the Day would consider possibly expanding it, because we now have the no engine retarder brakes, which is well appreciated by many people in the city. That would be something just to keep in mind. But other than comments made, I think we've well covered it. I know there's going to be residents very excited to see this bylaw come forward soon from Legislative Services and Engineering to get this implemented and start the process. Because just to clarify and to make it clear, and I think there's going to be a need, it's been brought up, the communication is going to be so important because people using the Agricultural Exhibition Association and just numerous other businesses and places throughout the town, the city, they will need to get educated. And I think you've identified that already in the lead up to this as it comes forward. Councillor Monroe?
Just for implementation, when are you looking at in 2021 for this to be, obviously there's bylaws that need to be adjusted, but when are you looking for the actual implementation of the entire road?
We would look to implement the signage and the swap over, I guess you could call it, probably late fall of 2021, just so that we had time to complete any bylaw amendments we need to do, the education piece, get the signage up, and basically get people used to it before we turn the switch over and get bylaw enforcement included in the loop. So we would be looking for fall, winter 2021.
Correct. Thank you.
Councillor Fagin.
Just one other question there, James. When we think about dangerous goods, a lot of times I think people are thinking that it's always semis, it's always large trucks. However, that's not the case. There's lots of, our local trucking companies, the purulators, they all have, they're carrying dangerous goods a lot of times, just in smaller quantities. Janitorial supply houses. So there's lots of smaller vehicles on those roads as well. So it's not always just the big trucks that are out there, just to bring the public awareness that way. I don't know if you ever looked at a percentage to see what that would be, small to large, but
yeah. We do have a percentage of trucks going through, large trucks, medium trucks, small trucks, what they're carrying, and usually where their destinations are originating from and to. So I can provide that information in a supplementary report to the Mayor Council.
Great, thank you, James.
Councillor Baker, was there any other comments you had?
Your worship.
Councillor Baker, is there any other comments you have?
I'm sorry you're breaking up on me.
Okay. Is there any other comments?
Pat Johnson asked me. His machine's working good.
Do you have any other comments, Councillor Baker?
No, thanks. No, that was great. Thank you.
All right. I'll look around the table one more time. Everybody good? Excellent. Well, thank you very much, James and Carmen, for joining us, or Cameron, sorry, for joining us today in the presentation. I think some good discussion and some great information. I know the community will certainly be waiting patiently for this to come forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship, members of council. Have a good afternoon.
You too.
Thank you as well.
Moving on to 4.3, we'll just take a moment here and get ready for the next presenter. With that, I'll look to the city manager.
Thank you, Worship. For 4.3, new mechanical wastewater treatment facility validation report, I'll ask Terry Bird to come forward and present.
Turn on the board thing. Afternoon, Mayor and Council.
Good afternoon, Terry.
So I'm here to present an update on the new mechanical wastewater treatment facility, specifically dealing with the validation report. Just want to give a little bit of background, just to get everybody up to speed on things. But back in So back in 2019, we started off this project going with IPD, and at that stage, we as the owners put together a steering committee, which came up with, which established our owners' requirements, goals, and constraints. These objectives are what we as a municipality want this project to achieve. So obviously, regulatory side of things, meaning obviously the SWASA or Saskatchewan Water Security Agency objectives or regulations, as well as the Environment Canada's objectives, timelines for schedule. Sorry, I dropped drew a blank. But all those kind of key aspects of things, how we work together, how we can bring in the local community as best as we can, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Those principles of that owner's requirements, goals, and constraints are used throughout this project extensively in any of the decision making that has happened to make sure that those decisions are aligned 100% to what we brought up and come up with. The other key pieces, of course, would be the procurement of the actual main team, which is Shandelsburg Joint Venture, which is our general contractor, ISL Engineering, which is our design engineer, Suez Water Technologies as their technology vendor, and Magna Floor, which is our electrical controls and system integration component. This IPD team is comprised of all those four, as well as the city, through all the implementation of this project. And this project, IPD, establishes 4 key aspects or key phases to the project. The first one being this one, the validation phase. The next one being design and procurement. then into construction, and then the final one being the warranty period. Okay. Just making sure. So the first aspect of things is obviously the validation phase, and I want to get clear what the validation phase, or the end product of the validation phase is. Ultimately, it's a report that the team, the IPD team, basically puts forward certainty as to what they can meet the city's objectives or not. So the objectives being, as I stated before, but making sure it's within our budget and our schedule. The key aspects of the work that we've done since January of this year, it started off back on January 27th of 2020, and I've been working these last 7-8 months to complete this report. The key aspects being utilizing our big room that we have at the Operations Center, which of course stopped as part of the COVID-19 measures, and we moved off into the virtual world as we all had to experience throughout these past few months. The team adapted very well to that change and has continued on with this work and completing this report. Again, I want to make sure that understood the validation phase provides project certainty, so the IPT team must be able to state with confidence that we can build the plant or facility that meets all our owners' requirements, goals, and constraints, and does these things to meet the regulations, the budget, and the schedule that we have outlined. And the biggest things of that, of course, is our required regulatory side of things, as I mentioned before, SWAS Environment Canada. We need to have a facility in place by December 1st of 2023. And of course, the constraints that we have as a municipality, bringing forward the project to meet our budget of $81.5 million. The key aspects to the schedule are, in all reality, for the next steps after the validation phase, is the design procurement, which can start immediately after council reviews and gives us the go-ahead, which is anticipated to come forward to council next Monday, August 17th. Starting that phase immediately after that, we're also looking to start a construction phase. Very, very minor work. I put it together for $81.5 million. We're only looking at doing some of the minor work this fall associated with site grading, a little bit of site grading, utility relocations. We have a sludge stockpile that has to be moved out of the way, et cetera, et cetera. Those small little items just to prepare us for that construction part of it. The biggest construction is slated to start in the spring of 2021 and continue on until June, I think it was 2023, just off the top of my head. So we're anticipating to be up and running well before our deadline of December 1st, 2023. The design procurement phase is slated to be done actually within a year of today, so end of July. And so we'll have all that detailed design and procurement of almost all the goods, if not all the goods and services by that point in time. It's just a matter of scheduling all that work to be done over that time period. So the big part of the teams that were, the 4 teams and then all the team members associated with that was the implementation of project implementation teams. And these teams are grouped together as per their expertise. So the buildings design side of things, so obviously architects and some key people that have the knowledge base of how to build a structure or structures side of things. The process team, the major components, of course, of that is the individuals that have the key expertise in designing a wastewater treatment facility as per the actual processing of the sewage effluent. And there's probably 10 to 12 project implementation teams that were established as part of this project, and each, of course, had very similar roles of very specific pieces of this facility. I want to go over, I guess, more on those key aspects that came out of that validation or that certainty as part of this project that this report alludes to. And that one would be, the first one, main one would be, of course, our treatment technology. Through the earlier stages, we went through a choosing by advantages evaluation approach. That approach takes into a lot of considerations. Again, I talked about owners' requirements, goals, and constraints. Those are included into there, and how do these technologies meet those, as well as obviously, but breaking it down a little more in smaller pieces.
And through that process, a membrane bioreactor was chosen out of, I think we started off with 12 and narrowed it down to 1. A few went away pretty fast once we started looking at cost and that future sustainability side of things, but ultimately an MER bioreactor was chosen. Through that, more detailed work went along with the process team as to how this process system would actually be built around the membrane bioreactor, as well as what we see as a municipality for effluent, quality, quantity, all that kind of criteria. And from that, the team also chose a use of a primary clarifier. A primary clarifier is not a typical thing we would see as a municipality, our size of municipality, but it's not something that you wouldn't see in a larger municipality side of things. Sorry, I'll slow down here a bit. The key components of choosing the primary clarifier was the oil events that we receive at the sewage treatment plant right now. So at certain times, we're up to, I think Karen gave me something like 45 events over the past 5 years. So we're looking at 10 events just dealing with oil. And this is crude oil I'm talking about. In most cases, it's crude oil. So being an oil industry municipality, it's tough to govern and control those things. We're moving forward with more and more initiatives to try to stop that and get it down to zero. But in all reality, it's still happening and still continues to happen on a fairly frequent basis. But again, it goes in ebbs and flows. But on average, we're looking at, let's say, 45 events in the last 5 years. We also have fairly large events where we're dealing with other large contaminants or stuff that really has a major impact to a treatment technology or treatment facility, and that would be grease and other types of similar types like that. So those two events really drove the decision making of the primary clarifier. This had a fairly significant impact to the project budget, but in the end, it does outweigh the negative effects that these things could come out of the plant. One, the amount of cleaning that we'd have to do within the membrane facility. Each time you clean the membranes, you're losing a little bit of life. The chance of losing our biological component of our bioreactors. Reestablishing the biology is not a turn off the switch and turn it back on quickly and you're back up and going again. We're talking days to maybe even weeks and months to get that back up and going. So those parameters all came into play in making that decision moving forward. The other key components that was chosen as part of those project implementation teams, for the building side of it, it was chosen to break it down into 3 components. There's the administration side of things, which is looking at the conventional build, the main process area, which includes key process for pumps and all that kind of stuff like that, but also the testing lab and control area. That is going to be looking to be more of a pre-engineered structural building. And then another component would be for the primary clarifiers and the actual bioreactors, the tankages, and the membranes would be outside. That was just basically on those decisions were made more on cost than anything of not putting them inside the facility, which we looked at as part of climate and everything else, and there's no negatives as part of including those in the outside environment. The other key pieces of where we're at with this validation report is the use of our existing facilities or our infrastructure that we have out on site today. So we got our existing headworks building, and we got three lagoons, and we even have our effluent pump station as well. All that will be reutilized and or updated to accommodate the new facility. The headworks, of course, will be our first line of attack with as part of the sewage that's coming into the system. So our core screens will take into consideration all that side of things. The one major big change would be the use of our lagoon cells. Instead of being a traditional lagoon as we have them today, one cell will be used for a sludge storage. So in all this mechanical treatment technology, there's going to be a sludge component coming off of each system, and this will be stored in one of the cells. The other 2 cells will be used to accommodate wet weather flows. We do get these absorbent rains we've experienced in the past few years, and those rains do affect our sewage treatment system, and we have to make our best effort to accommodate them as best as we can. So that's basically an overview of where we're at for the most part. Again, the team will be providing a report. It will be added to the agenda for the council meeting, RFD for August 17th, and it affirms that the team can build the facility on schedule and on budget. It is tracking a little higher right now, but the team is making the certainty or the aspiration, or making it known that they are committed to building it within our budget. Any implications over our budget of $81.5 million will go against their profit and have no implications against the city as such. I don't think I think I've got the majority of the stuff. If you have any questions, so I'll pass it off to you.
Councilor Fletcher.
Thanks, Your Worship. Thank you. Terry, so two questions. One is we talked about strategies for mitigating, some of the heavy oil and whatnot in being found in our sewage system, and as well as grease. So, what are other people doing? I mean, we can obviously pay a fine, have people pay a fine for it if we can track it down to its source. But how difficult is that?
It's a fairly major task, and we already started. Source control is the program that we've utilized or established already within the city. And Karen's looking at changing the pollution prevention program. But they are going from business to business and making sure that their salt pits are being drained and cleaned up, on a regular basis. Also, in the newer areas, we are requiring, the inclusion of a testing station or manhole, so that we can go and dip once in a while through the effluent and see if they're actually meeting the regulations that we have in place. So we as a municipality have started that process. Are we there yet? No. In that you really have to try to figure out how do you get down to that specific person that dealt on that specific second of that day to catch them to do that before you actually mitigate it to zero, right? And that's a challenge. And sorry, and speaking for Karen's purposes, she is looking at elevating that, and what can we do? Can we add more testing, more manholes into our network, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and that's coming forward, being planned right as we speak.
Okay, just as sort of part of this as well is that I got a call from a fellow probably about a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years now, but he has a series of businesses that are located next to a restaurant, and his sewage backed up because there was grease in the line, and he has ended up sort of bearing the cost, or I don't know what happened in the end, but do we have in our bylaws, do we require restaurants and people who use grease as part of their day-to-day operations to have a pit or I'm not even sure what it's called?
Yeah, I think their terminology is a grease trap.
Grease trap, I have no idea what it looks like or
Yeah, me neither, I should know the terminology, so to be honest with you, I do believe that there's a requirement for these restaurants to include those things, and I've heard of what, again, it comes down to them maintaining it,
yes,
and regularly maintaining it. If they have it on a regular schedule, I'm going just what if scenarios, right? If they do it on a regular schedule, it's probably more fine than if they happen to miss something, then you're out of the bed, right?
Last part, so, but I didn't answer the other part of the question. Do we require it as a part of a bylaw or business license process at all? Or?
I do believe it probably goes back to building code in a lot of ways.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I was just thinking of that. That's a question.
City Manager.
I believe we have a testing mechanism as well for restaurants and those, and they do pay if they're over a certain, I don't know the terminology around it, but if they're over the threshold of a certain area, they do pay an extra, call it a fine, call it a fee, they call it testing. If they're within the limits that the city pays for the testing fee, there's a procedure in place that we do, and it's I believe it's monthly, and depending on the type of business you have, it is determined on how often you're tested. But I'm guessing, based on some of the feedback I get, that restaurants are tested more often than most.
Yeah. Okay. And the final question, I guess, is I guess the thing for me around this is that solar energy, alternate energy around supporting where we're going with this project. And have we explored, are there any federal grants or grants on provincial levels to support alternate power to be part of the project? And is that in mind, I guess, as the project's been designed?
As part of the project, we have to complete, I think it was climate plans is the verbology, and a greenhouse gas assessment.
Okay.
And once we're into this procurement or design and procurement phase, we are going to pick up those evaluations, those assessments as part of our funding requirements. So that's where it might be identified that some of those solar or some of those other components could come into play and help out with the facility itself to meet those objectives.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions, comments? Councilor Thorson?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just mostly, my main question I had is, first I'll start with a comment, just that, so far through the process, it looks like we are on track and on our way there, which is good to see as far as, having gone through the process as an IPD project and having kind of a price that's within our amount that we're able to spend within our grant funds, all of that, and having a technology that's more or less we found and said, yeah, one way or another, we can do this for 81.5 million. So all that, awesome. I'm happy to hear that and happy to start moving forward on the next steps here in the next few weeks. The question I had was some of the items that you've added. They've like a clarifier to deal with the other things coming in, kind of adding something to the process you wouldn't normally have in a municipality of our size. But do those do anything as far as reducing operating costs or reducing costs down the road where that could help overall with this facility?
Yeah, good question. Thank you, Councillor. Yes, again, any type of pretreatment that you can do will help the process down at the back end side of things. So those are all taken into consideration with the system that is being put forward as part of the validation report. So there's definitely some reductions in tank sizes, the amount of membranes per se that we need. All those kind of key pieces come into play. So everything reduced in a reduction will actually obviously go into operating as well, right? How we operate the plant and being more efficient and everything else too. So.
And the other thing I heard was that you said that on the membrane side of things, having this will actually extend the useful life of your average membrane in that entire contraption, which is somewhat of a consumable, but you expect it to last a handful of years at a time, and they're very, very expensive.
Yeah, the membranes are fairly expensive. We're talking in millions of dollars for membrane systems, the actual cartridges and stuff like that. Overall, yeah, there's a 9-10 year warranty typically usually in place with those membranes. So anytime you're doing cleaning of those things, you're reducing that life expectancy. So there's definitely a cost that we can extend out to life expectancy.
So from my perspective, that's why I see is adding those things on the front end, like this clarifier contraption. If it can extend the useful life of those other parts and pieces that are more technical, more expensive, everything else, that's just going to be good for the city in the long run in terms of being able to manage the cost of this. The other, I'm not sure if you mentioned it within this presentation, but what was kind of the useful life looking outwards of this facility before there's a potential need for expansion? I don't know if I got a specific date in there, but not that I would hold you to it and say, hey, it's got to be on this exact date, but I think it's important to consider when we look at the amount of long-term debt that's needed for the city and the amount that may be in additional operating costs that come with it. And then also considering, some of these other items as we're looking at them, do you do it a bit cheaper with cheaper operating costs? Because in the long run, we're going to have to find a way to pay for the expansion while we're paying for the one that we have. So it's not going to be easy no matter what we do.
No, very good question, Councillor. But we're designing this facility to be 20 years of life. And that's city growth in those 20 years of, I think it was 2.1% birth rate as per our latest growth study that we have established. So we definitely have 20 years. If we don't grow as we get expected, we got going longer. We all get more energy or more efficient in our use of sewage and everything else. We get a little bit longer, but based on all the studies and everything else, the plant is designed for 20 years as we see it today.
And one of the other items, I know I've heard it being said before, is that the plan for this is to design it so that it's plug and play, more or less expandable. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's part of I talked about those owners' requirements, goals, and constraints. One of the key objectives there was future sustainability. So how can we adapt and add to this? And that is taken into consideration, yes.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Any more questions around the table? Councilor Fagan.
I found it very interesting that you're able to utilize all those, the infrastructure that's there. So that's very innovative and enjoy that. I do have a little concern on 20 years though. 20 years just seems to go by. I've been here 30 years and it just seems like I was here yesterday. And I remember a councillor telling me one time that one of the smartest things they did when they were building the water intake was they had large capacity that I think we were at, what, 40 years with that, somewhere in that vicinity?
We could be, I'm not too sure.
Yeah, so that would be, hopefully we will be able to find that technology and our wastewater will be utilized a little further on a whole volume side of things. But certainly when I take a look listening to the folks in Saskatchewan and Suma, I think that their government over the last year has been heavily hinting that they want to have regionalization. There's so many small little plants out there, both water treatment as well as on the waste side of things, and they're trying to go more on the regional side. So I would certainly be thinking that we would be getting some interest from both east and west over the next number of years. So that's just a concern I have on the quickness of 20 years and the potential of others coming on board.
Yeah, I'll agree with you. 20 years doesn't seem a lot of time, but this provides a path moving forward for the municipality that meets the regulations that we have in place, has some adaptability that we believe will be adaptable to future changes to regulations. Yes, there may be some more equipment that we need to add on, like UV or stuff like that, like just for example, right? That we can adapt it quite easily and give us a little more life expectancy. But 20 years was within the budget that we had, and that's why that number was used. And typically in industry, it's 20 years.
Okay.
It has been a 20-year plan for a few years now. So.
No, fair enough. One of the other things I was just wondering if they've ever looked at is on the automation side of things, with the grease and oil within sewers. Nowadays they've got everything is Bluetooth and can work very well. Just by having, you don't even have to have more manholes. You can probably do some sensors and get some pretty good ideas where those are coming from, and it's all automated. So I don't know if that's ever been considered.
Very good question, Councillor. Actually, we have done a lot of investigation into technology and how can we incorporate it to handle those types of events. There's nothing, we couldn't find anything that would give us a guarantee that it's going to detect everything. And I guess that's the chance that we're not willing to take as part of the design team or the team that was actually put forward. When you're getting in oil, sometimes it'll suspend, sometimes it's going to go right to the bottom, sometimes it's going to be in the middle. So how you're setting your sensors, you're going to be able to cover that whole pipe or just a very narrow. So there's always uneasiness as to whether technology is going to do what we want it to do. Ideally, I would hope that there's something out there, bang, off it goes this way instead of going to the plant. We were looking for that and was not able to find that.
Okay, thank you.
Terry, a couple of questions I've been asked over the last couple of years as we've talked about moving to a new mechanical wastewater treatment plant. Is there going to be any odor issues that people say that we can't smell our lagoons now in most cases? Is there any question about the new mechanical plant having odor issues?
As far as we're expecting, there will be no differences in how we operate and experience it today. Most of the odor will come out of the sludge side of things, and I talked about that one cell being used for our sludge storage. We will be encapsulating that storage of sludge with a water column on top of it, very similar to what we're experiencing today with our lagoons. The sludge is on the bottom, the water column on the top. So because of that, we're not anticipating that odor to be any different.
You talked about the process having 10-year warranty, and it talks about in the report here, the in-depth report. Can you give us But what are we looking at for just like buying a vehicle or buying something else? What's the warranty that we're going to get with the basic construction of a new wastewater treatment plant? What kind of warranty is expected for the city can expect?
Good question, Your Worship. The base warranty as part of the CCDC 30 is 1 year. So that covers the whole facility itself. The whole IPD team will be holding back some money associated with that warranty period. But that covers the whole everything in the building for 1 year. When you talk about the other additional warranties, the city, it's been brought forward that if the city works with Suez, which is our treatment or technology vendor side of things, work with them to provide them with some more information on an ongoing basis, maybe some operator assistance, whatever. There's a lot of other options that the city could work with them on. If we get into those base options with Suez, they will extend the membranes out to 9 years, I think it is.
Okay.
So there's some optional things that can come into play, but right now the base is 1 year.
Thank you. And certainly, I guess that one item that we often hear about is contingency planning. Is there some contingency planning in that $81.5 million? And I know you've been back and forth, and just wondering if you can touch on that just a little bit.
Yeah, I got the number here somewhere. I think it's, I can't find it right off the top of my head, but in the evaluation report, there's what we call a risk register, and this is that contingency that Your Worship was talking about. And in that, it's identifying $3.5 million of contingency, which is quite low for obviously an $81.5 million plant. We're not even near 5% in all reality. So the teams went through a lot of potentials that could come at us, and this includes COVID-19 in all reality too, is how we build this thing in this environment has an impact, and we're carrying some costs associated with that, maybe a little extra time, maybe more manpower, or whatever it happens to be, but we're carrying over some of that contingency associated with that piece. And yeah, it's 3.5 and change, if I remember right.
Okay. And you did touch on COVID. So we have a big room, and I know a lot of things have changed. Can you bring us up to speed how COVID has affected it? And you just talked about some cost potential more, but has there been some cost savings? And I hate to say that from COVID, but in essence, has there been some realization based on what's happened to this point?
You're correct in that COVID-19 obviously puts a major implication onto the team. We talk about being a very collaborative environment, to be able to go up and talk to somebody, get your answers, or make the questions, whatever it happens to be. The big room, we did, I think it was about a month to 2 months in the big room. So the beginning of March is where that stopped. So that work that we've done, that we completed in that time period, helps establish those relationships with the rest of the team. Everybody got to know what their teammates were, what their expertise was, and all that kind of stuff like that. So I take that as a very positive into when we went into the virtual world as part of the COVID-19 thing. So obviously virtual meetings, video conferencing, all that kind of stuff like that. I would say we stumbled, but we didn't stumble very far. And when we adapted to the virtual side of things, that relationship building and that understanding from that initial work just flowed right into the virtual side of things. You talk about being saving some money. Yeah, unfortunately, we are not utilizing the room that we built up and everything else. That has I guess, a negative to that. But we are saving in travel costs. Those team members don't have to travel to City of Lloydminster on a weekly basis. So there's flights involved with some of these team members. Obviously there's hotel, obviously there's travel. All those costs are pretty much reduced to zero. There's still the odd thing that some of the team members come out to site just to check, to make sure that they found a telecommunications line or whatever else, but very, very minimalistic. So there's been some savings based off of that, and we're still anticipating, even when we get into design and procurement, unless things change drastically, we're most likely going to be in this virtual world most of the time.
Thank you. Councillor Baker, I'll get Councillor Torreson first, and then I'll come to you, Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just one more question, and I think, you've already explained it with the IPD model, things work slightly different, but you said that the $3.5 million contingency, so there isn't any kind of, what we'll call, kind of class basis cost estimates built into those numbers. Class 5 would have plus or minus 45% or anything like that. The number you guys came up with is relatively much more kind of zoned in already. Is that a fair statement? that it wouldn't be the normal class estimate system?
Yeah, the principles of the risk register, of course, is one identifying the risk, and then from there, it's discussed as a team how much of that risk is really applicable to the project. So there's a little bit of evaluation criteria.
Right.
And then from there, what is everybody's assumptions on what that dollar value would be? Based on the scoring, that would either reduce or increase that base cost, based on the amount of risk that's going to actually physically come towards the project. So the dollar value is not necessarily a true, I guess, classified estimate, but I believe based on the expertise that's part of that evaluation, it's pretty close.
Oh, right on. It's interesting. Thank you.
Councillor Buckingham.
Thank you, Richard. Thanks, Terry. I was just curious, so just to make sure I got my head around this completely. In the original design phase, this pre-treat was not included, correct? This was something that was added in the IPD phase whenever it was going through it all?
Correct, the primary clarifier, you mean?
Yes.
Yes, in the design that was completed back in, 3 or 4 years ago, is that what you're referring to? You did not have a primary clarifier at that time, but it didn't get to the detail that I think really got into answering that question at that time though, as well.
So, you may have said it before, I just wanted to bring it up here. If we didn't have that pre-treatment system there, and we had one of these oil or grease major events, what would the costs associated be with, or damages that could potentially happen within that facility without that? What I'm looking for, I guess, is just some more justification on the actual pre-treatment system that's there. Do you have any idea what the damages or what could happen without it?
Without having a little more analysis done, I'm just doing a pure guess here, and we're probably talking a minimum of $200,000.
For one event?
One event.
Right.
Because you're looking at having to clean the whole process system, right from the headworks right to the final stages. And then getting into how has it affected our biological treatment side of things. And that's also getting into our membranes. If that stuff gets in our membranes, you're using some different chemicals or solutions to get it off than what you normally apply to that membrane.
So 45 events in 5 years at $200,000 a piece, not including the fact that damages that could be done inside there, reducing the membrane life and everything else. Pretty much a very simple decision for the team, I assume, when you consider all the factors when it comes to cost.
Yeah, and the other key piece of there I think I talked about too was that operational efficiency. That primary clarifier is another treatment where you will take some more of that BODs and all that kind of stuff like that and eliminate it as well and dump it into the sewage or the sludge cell as well.
Okay, so maybe the rest of the plant have to work less, therefore
more
extend
efficient
life and more efficient and
Yes.
so on and so forth.
100%, yeah.
Thanks.
Councillor Baker, do you have any questions?
No, I'm good to go, sir.
Well, thank you. I just wanted to go back to Councillor Buckingham's comments. I think the important thing for people to realize is that this team has been able to find $10 million worth of savings on the original plan to pay for this primary clarifier. And I really want to say thank you to the team because I know they've been up and down on the dollars and cents as they walk through this process, but I think it needs to be very clear that this is something that's being added to the plant that was never even in the original budget way back when we asked the government for money. So I really appreciate how they've been able to find cost efficiencies in that facility. And I think that there was a lot of concern from some people in the community about going to an IPD, something a little different. But I support administration from that point on, and I still do, and I believe council is supportive of that model because it's so unique in finding how the teams worked and having the opportunity to sit on the steering committee at the very top end of this. As the mayor, it's been very interesting to see the work that our team has done, working with the consultants, working with the contractors that have been picked to this point. And I think that we're going to see some tremendous effort from everybody because, as Terry has outlined, they're still challenged by the price, but they're working towards it. They know where they've got to be, and they're prepared to commit to that. So I think it'll be great to see this move forward next week if that's the will of council. But I think that it's the opportunity for the city to do it right and meet those environmental standards that we've heard so much about for the last couple of years. So thank you, Terry, for your efforts and for the presentation today.
Thank you. Yeah, just the price that you're talking about, Your Worship, the team is very confident they're going to meet that goal, and I do believe we're going to be able to. I really do. Every decision that's being made is being strictly on making sure that we get value out of it, but also making sure we meet those the schedule and the cost side of things. So I do agree with you that we're doing great things with this thing, and it's been a very challenging thing to adapt to in the IPD world. But once you see things happening, you start to understand the key benefits of going down this road. And I truly hang my hat with this project and what we're going to have for an outcome coming December 1st, 2023. Not right, I don't think it's before, I should say.
I do appreciate that, and I know the next council certainly will appreciate it, because as it was jokingly made, somebody could have went to jail here to say in January 2021, but we've got that problem resolved till 2023. So you've bought a necktie for somebody for a little while. So I appreciate that very much. So no, I totally appreciate the efforts that you folks are putting in, because as you said, this is something that was not something you've done on a regular run-of-the-mill, as they say. This is a new adventure. It's been challenging for everybody, and I appreciate them stepping up to that challenge.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Terry. Moving on to agenda item number 5, governance and priorities matters. I'll look to the city manager.
Thank you, Worship. 5.1, Q2, governance document review report. I'll ask Chelsea from the first to present how she's going forward.
Good afternoon, Your Worship and Council. Administration has completed the second quarter governance document review. The attached report outlines all governance documents that have been reviewed or created within the second quarter. As part of the governance document review, administration has initiated review on 10 governance documents. In addition to the review, administration has brought forward a total of 12 governance documents for approval. I won't go through the entire report, just a couple of things that I want to mention. On page 2 of the report, it shows all of the statuses for all of the reviews that have been completed or initiated. The couple that mention that they will be repealed, Ledge Services will be bringing those forward next council meeting, just as they're outdated and no longer required. And majority of the other ones have been completed or initiated. And I'll open it up for any questions or comments.
Thank you, Chelsea. Any questions or comments from council administration? Councilor Diachak.
Thanks, Richard. Thanks, Chelsea. I want to say, just based on many decades of experience in public education, one of the places that often gets overlooked and left behind is policy section, because it's so exciting and demanding and in your face every day. People just can't run away from it. But the fact that there's a strategy in place to sort of methodically say you're going to do a particular amount and review them as you're going, I think is probably the easiest way to take this dose of medication as you go through it. So I appreciate the fact that as a city we're doing this. It is viewed as a priority. Because we've seen instances where we haven't updated bylaws or policies, and we've found where there's loopholes, and all of a sudden people can take advantage of the city in particular ways that we may not want to see happen. So I think from protecting the interests of the ratepayers and the city, that the fact that we're doing this is an important piece. And thank you.
Absolutely.
Words well spoken, Councillor. I think that as we sit on this side as governance, without the tools to do, I hope, good governance, we're not doing our job, and I appreciate administration keeping us up to date, because they look after that portion of it. They look to us for direction, and I appreciate the opportunity to see where we're going. And as Chelsea alluded to, as they come forward, they will be repealed, and that's our responsibility to make that happen, if that's the recommendation, based on their argument and presentation. But at the same time, also making sure that the public is aware of what's going on, and that's a joint relationship as well between administration, ensuring that people know that bylaws have changed and policies, as well as the communication from council. So thank you very much. Any other comments? Councillor Torreson.
My microphone's on. Thank you, Your Worship. No, just generally speaking, as we wind down to the end of a term, this is an area that is probably one of the least attractive, I guess you'll say, but probably one of the most important things that I think our council and through us us administration has stayed committed to, which is to go through our policies, make sure that the ones we have are relevant, make sure that they're, relevant to the world that we're living in at that moment and the way we want to see things. And to be honest with you, it's one of those areas where I just think that we made leaps and bounds from where it was 4 years ago. And it's really good to see, and having a schedule like this and continuing and making it a priority means that, regardless of what happens come November, that it's hopefully going to continue to be a priority and stay on the agenda of all these items that are really important to go through, on a regular basis. So that the city manager isn't forced to make decisions or have excessively long council meetings all the time to make decisions on things where you have, a policy in place where it says that, in scenarios like this, we act in this way. It takes a lot of pressure off of administration, and it makes it really clear what the council's all about. And I think it's a good thing to have, and we have to continue to do it. And at the end of the day, I'm happy that we've done what we've done up to this point. So thank you.
Any other comments from council? Councillor Baker, do you have any comments? Councillor Baker, do we still have you?
No,
Good to go, thank you. All right, thank you very much, Chelsea. Moving on to agenda item number 6, I'll look for inquiries from the media.
Thank you, Your Worship. Today we have an interview request for Councilor Diatrek and yourself, Mayor Elders.
Thank you very much. I will look for direction on committee going into recess.
Motion to recess.
Councillor Diatrek, motion to recess. Councillor Buckingham gets the seconder. All in favor? How do you vote, Councillor Baker? Thank you.